Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about, well, power cars versus handling cars when it comes to building vehicles on Forza Horizon 4. You see, back on Horizon 3, cars like this Chevy Nova were pretty much the way to go. This has got 1,000 horsepower, it is all-wheel drive, and it sits in A-Class. Yeah, it's on standard tyres, admittedly very wide standard tyres, it's mad, it's very quick, and as you can see against this field of AIs, even this field of AI cars that are also all A-Class muscle cars, this thing is insanely fast, accelerating, absolutely awful to drive. Now, when it came to Horizon 3, that was, to be honest, the best way to go, on the most part. Put in a very big, powerful engine, make a car all-wheel drive in whatever class you were building it to, and it tended to work. There were odd exceptions where it didn't. However, cars like my famously bonkers Clio Williams were very, very difficult to beat. They were very difficult to beat in their class because the races were, on the most part, very open. The roads were pretty straightforward. For cars like this, the straight line speed, the acceleration, the power that these cars had more than made up for their deficiencies when it came to the corners. And I was certainly curious to see how things would pan out in Horizon 4. Now, the road that I have this first race on, this is one of the more open sort of stages. This one is a fairly far. The point-to-point races are you tending to find the more open roads, the faster areas. Quite a lot of the stages. Then when I was filming this, I was looking around for the different circuits. Circuits are mostly very, very technical. There are also some very technical point-to-point races, especially when you are running up around, through Edinburgh. These are pretty damn narrow city streets. And while, we had cities in Horizon 3, even on those circuits, some of the seriously powerful cars would still be very, very quick. Now, there will be times when power cars are going to be very helpful around some of these routes. However, I've been finding, certainly playing through the campaign, playing through the single player, if you like, I've not been massively leaning towards make everything all-wheel drive and give it 1,000 horsepower, V8, V12, V10, whatever it might be that goes in the car. Tended to be building vehicles considerably more balanced, if anything, erring a little bit more towards handling, just for the sheer sake of consistency almost, with a lot of the cars. You can see against the AI here, the BMW, BMW was quicker than me, the Clio in fact was quicker than this Bentley that I was driving. This is a Horizon Edition Bentley, so while I personally didn't build it, it's also a bit more based towards handling. It's got the full Mighty Wing kit and the GT3 kit on essentially. Either way, you can see the time I can make up here against the AI cars by having a vehicle that is good handling. When you again see the road that we're coming up to having to deal with here. Yeah, there are a couple of straights where those power cars are going to have a lot of fun. We've also got a massive roundabout, an incredibly long left-hander here, where, well, if I don't have the grip, you're not going to have a fun time through a lot of these corners. So building vehicles is going to, I think, take a fair bit more consideration. It's going to take a fair bit more consideration. Big power all-wheel drive cars, perhaps not going to be the way to go, but they needed a bit more of a scientific test for this one. So I set up a little challenge. I was going to build two cars to different classes. I was going to build a B-class car and an A-class car. One would be, well, two versions of two different cars. There would be a handling version of the car built primarily to focus on handling, and a power version made all-wheel drive with probably as bigger engine swap as I can get in it. For example, this MGB. This is a B-class, all-wheel drive, has a 6.2 litre V8. That's 415 horsepower in a car that weighs very, very little. It is mighty fast accelerating, mighty fast launching. However, it is difficult to drive, and I'm going to take the cars around a twisty circuit and a faster circuit. And when I say twisty circuit, I mean this is a proper twisty circuit. This is a proper technical, proper difficult circuit to even just drive a car around full stop. This is a narrow street circuit. There's a lot of braking zones, there's a lot of corners, and while yes, there is a lot of acceleration zones where all-wheel drive is good, there aren't long straights here. There's nowhere to really make the most, certainly of the top speed that the 400 horsepower V8 is going to give the MG. And as you can see, it is not nice through the corners. This thing is a real struggle to get it turned through the corners. Now, the car wasn't given just all handling parts, because you know you're not going to build a car like that when you're building a vehicle for a certain class. You're not going to build a car quite in that way. So there was race brakes and suspension on the kind of power version of the MG, and likewise on this handling version of the car. I didn't put it on at full race tyre. I'm not of a B class. I'm not going to have the car on full race tyres. It's a little bit redundant in terms of PI. It's got sport tyres. It's got a turbo on it. In fact, it's got a very, very fluttery turbo. In fact, as we go around the course, you can see the massive difference visually, the way that the car is handling these corners, the speed at which I can carry through the turns. And sure, I'm not going to quite have the acceleration of that high-powered car, but it is so much nicer to drive. And in terms of lap time, as you can imagine, it is, yeah, far faster. This perhaps is not so much of a surprise. This is a fairly extreme example of a circuit. There are considerably more tracks, considerably more areas that are designed like this. In previous Horizon games, most circuits have been pretty bloody fast. Most circuits have been pretty open, and I'm glad to see. Well, maybe some places, yeah, the roads are still wide. The actual corners, the actual layout will still demand a fair amount of grip for the vehicle. You might also notice I am having to do this technically in a race. Unfortunately, I am sad to inform you, there is no class-based rivals once more. I don't know why. I'm not sure on that one. Rivals are set up. Each circuit has a rivals event that's a time trial with a specific car. So I'm having to use a race to do a time trial. It's a bit weird. I don't quite understand why we've got this again. It's something we've got. I mean, I can make it work. It's just a bit fiddly. I guess I'll make good money at the end of it. So there's that. Now, our fast circuit. I didn't realise, a lot of course, the point-to-point races are probably going to be your faster options, although I personally prefer lap races more than straight-up point-to-point stuff. Of the lap circuits, this was the fastest one that I could find. And this is still pretty nasty. This has still got some fairly, well, fiddly little sections, and especially narrow section coming up here. But yeah, this is the best fast circuit. It's only the best fast circuit that I came across. There might still be stuff I haven't quite got to. Might be something I've overlooked somewhere. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty fast circuit. This perhaps is more similar to a lot of the stuff that we would have seen on Horizon 3. That bit there is quite narrow and a bit scary, but you know, we got through it a little bit of off-track action. Even around here, of course, the all-wheel drive V8 MG was not easy to drive. Yeah, we were fairly good when we came out onto this back straight. I will be honest, the gear ratios, I ran out of PI to actually swap the gearbox in the car. I wasn't actually expecting it to be a massive problem. It does just start buzzing the limiter as we get to the braking zone. It's perhaps only a couple of sort of miles an hour lost in that. We go buzzing the limiter 154. It's, you know, quite a lot of speed, and it's not necessarily just about the top speed. You know, we've got the acceleration out of the corners, we've got the acceleration up the hills even that we have around the place. Now, the handling, notice the straight line speed, yeah, we're down 20 or so miles an hour, and that really is all it's got down the section. So 20 miles an hour down. We're not going to have the same punch out of the corners. We're not going to have the same power or torque to pull us up the hills here. This is about half the power of the other version of the car. But, and here is the fairly sizable bit, it is actually very nice around these corners. And despite the fact this is a circuit that certainly I would say was more for your, well, the closest to a power circuit that we got before we start going to the point-to-point stuff, which is a little bit more awkward to time around with this current working system I have to do. At the end of the day, I'm going to spend my time do it. Certainly with the community, when it comes to events, I'm going to prefer to do circuit races. So this is sort of the faster end of the spectrum we're going to get in terms of. So there will still, of course, be uses for the point-to-point stuff, but I tend to find myself going to circuit racing more. And yeah, this is going to be your example of a faster circuit. And well, yeah, the handling car is a bit better again. The handling car, it can carry its speed so much better through the back turns on the course that might be 20 miles an hour down. It might not accelerate as quickly, but over the course of the lap, it is actually going to be a faster vehicle. I can't say I was necessarily expecting these results. Now, there are We're mostly sort of looking at variations in almost track design here. PI-wise, I think the likes of race tyres and so on add on less PI than we have seen in previous games. The way everything is balanced is a little bit different. While the actual classes for the cars seem fairly consistent, the actual sort of PI gain from adding on tyres is not as extreme, so that means you can get more grip in your car within a certain class, and it seems to at least at the moment, from the experimenting that I've done with the vehicles, it does tend to be the case that handling is, if anything, a little bit more important. So I went on to a Porsche. This was using the 944 Turbo. Built this car up to A class. Again, results might vary if you start going up to much higher classes, although, to be fair, much like we have seen in previous Forza games, quite a lot of vehicles won't ever get out of S1 class, unless it is a full-on supercar, high-end sports cars and so on. You put a massive engine in a classic muscle car or something, it's actually not likely to. It might just about sneak to the top of S1 class, but honestly, it's, yeah, not as likely. The Porsche, in terms of this car's build, while one was just over 200 horsepower, more powerful, 300-400 pounds heavier. It's not the biggest, the maddest difference I've had in terms of a power car and a handling car between the pair of them. The standard car kept its normal engine, was kept rear-wheel drive, better tyres, whereas the speed car, the blue one that we've got here, was V8 swapped again. 520 odd horsepower we had from, actually 550 horsepower, sorry, we had from this one up in A class. That's a decent amount of power going through the vehicle, and again, all-wheel drive, you've got that traction. Admittedly, if you were planning on doing some rallycross, all-wheel drive is always going to be very helpful. If you're likely to have to, multi-purposing with the car, maybe you would, well, so maybe you consider all-wheel drive is naturally going to help you out there, but in terms of the actual outright circuit racing that we've been doing here, power and all-wheel drive wasn't the answer. And I'm very glad to say that. I think there's going to be a little bit more, certainly with the way that I'm going to play the game, the way that I'm going to make events and so on. There will be plenty of silly events, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to track racing, I think there'll be a little bit more difficulty in building cars. I think we will see more vehicles potentially going for the, and I'm hoping going for the handling routes. In terms of lap times for the MGB, at the twisty track, there was over 4 seconds difference between the pair of them. That is, it is a terribly difficult track, and that power car was not massively nice to drive around there. But, it had got considerably more power. Much more traction. But that is a huge difference in time. Around the fast track, there was still some 3 seconds difference between them. The Porsche, it was a little bit closer. As I perhaps expected it to be, the actual vehicles themselves, build-wise, is a little bit closer. 1.5 seconds at the twisty track. It is actually just over 2 seconds at the faster circuit. I think perhaps I got a little bit luckier with the power. I might have extracted a little bit more out of the power car at the twisty track. Also, the Porsche wasn't as bad a handling car. Perhaps I was able to make the most of the vehicle's strength, the acceleration in places I maybe couldn't with the MG. Either way, though, that is still noticeable gaps. All of the handling cars won. So there are potentially some fast routes elsewhere, some point-to-point races, some faster routes where, of course, you're going to want a power car. And naturally, there are tracks where you're going to potentially want power cars, higher top speeds when it comes to any sort of racing game. But it does, certainly, it showed to me it was interesting doing this sort of stuff. That, you're going to have to think about your builds for the cars. It is not going to be a slap a big engine and make it all-wheel drive to guarantee to do well at every single race. There are some circuits, plenty of circuits in fact, where it's simply not going to work. It's just not going to be controllable. You're not going to have the grip to make the lap speed in the car. I'm happy to report that. I'm glad to report that. I look forward to seeing how the building, how the competition between the vehicles is going to go. That though is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.